first actual school building that was built in Royse City before the Royse City High School and that building was built. There were several small buildings around Royse City. There were like 3 different schools. One of them was in where they call it present day borough, which is just about 2 miles east on Highway 66. Another one was just a little southeast of Royse City, and then another small school building was down south on 548, going straight down toward, like you're going toward Terrell. And that was the Elm Grove School, Elm Grove. And so what they did is we had ended up with 206 students, and we had 4 teachers to take care of those 206 students. They got together and they built this school here, and so on the second floor was where the gymnasium was. It was an impressive structure with the columns in front, and this was right after the school was built. But after, and this 1906, this school only lasted like 7 or 8 years, and then they had to tear it down because the foundation gave way on it, and just didn't pay too much attention to the shifting soil of the blackland. We had a lot of athletics in Royse City. They started out, playing football in 1911. Girls basketball was around 1906. That was one of the first. They had 4 girls basketball teams at one school, and they were everybody all played. But back in those days, they played for girls. They played half court basketball, and it had six players instead of 5, and so they'd play half court, and then they'd switch and pass the ball down to the other end. This is the first baseball team in Royse City. This baseball team in particular, and you'll see it just says Royse on it. In those days, they called it Royse Town, not Royse City, but they called it Royse Town. But this baseball team was a traveling baseball team also. It went all around and played for picnics. They went 4th of July. They would go around the area. They were very, very good. Several of these kids were brothers. There was like 5 brothers on this one team. And believe it or not, but some of those guys' names were Summers. And so I guess some of these guys were kinfolk to me, but I don't really know which ones or who they are. But they were a very, very good baseball team, and they were very well known. This is the school board. And Mr. Pettigo was the president, and Mr. Miller. Mr. McGraw, the T.P. McGraw, he was a carpenter in Royse City, and he was actually the carpenter that built the First United Methodist Church in Royse City. You know, the beautiful church that's right there on that corner. He was the carpenter that went in and built that, and that's you can see he was serving on the school board in his term expired in 1910. So these were usually 3 to 4 year terms. So these guys probably came on there about 1907 or so. Mr. Sledge, the last guy down there, just kind of give you a little bit of some of the background on these guys. He actually went on to own a hardware store in Royse City. And something kind of unique about that guy is he also repaired the televisions in Royse City. All the televisions used to work off of tubes and not off of the circuit boards and things that they use now. And I can remember Mr. Sledge myself when he was an old man, that he would come to our house, and he was very kind of unique that he was a double jointed fella. And to get back behind the TV to work on your television, he would take his leg and put it behind his head. It was really funny to watch this guy and how he would work. Of course, as kids, we thought that was the funniest thing we ever saw. But Mr. Sledge, Of course, he was getting way up in age whenever that happened, but he was a television repairman and owned the hardware store. These are some of the teachers that we had, and it shows where they went to school. You'll see a lot of them that went to East Texas College, which is now Texas A&M Commerce. Uh, Before that, it was East Texas State University. Um, some of the things that they taught, they've taught piano in the school. They taught penmanship. I don't know if you guys don't teach penmanship and cursive very much anymore, but that was kind of big back in those days. Oratory and voice, that's kind of like a speech class. Um, Piano, stringed instruments, English and history, mathematics and science, Latin and Greek. Uh, there was one lady on here that I don't know if she's in this picture or not, but it's kind of interesting that one of those ladies, I think she's probably on the next one. Here's some of the courses that they had back in those days. Your first and second semesters, the math, they called it arithmetic back in those days, algebra, English, composition, rhetoric, literature. Um, Also taught Latin in the schools back in those Cicero, Caesar, Virgil. These were all prose and Greek and Latin languages. Civics, botany, science classes, things like that, physics, trigonometry. This is some of the folks that gave some of the teachers and what they taught. The second lady here, going down from the left, is Ethel Helms. What is so unique about her is she started teaching school when she was 14 years old. So you say, well, how she do that? Back in those days, you didn't have to go through, have to necessarily have a college education. Took some courses. Miss Helms was a brilliant lady, of course, but she was back in those days. She was only 14 years old when she was teaching in 1909, and she actually taught in Royse City for over 60 years, and she was my first grade teacher. She was a pretty old lady whenever, and she would take a pencil and come around if you were not doing what you were supposed to do. And the pencils back then that we used were about this big around, and they would sharpen these pencils. And she would come by and if you were doing something wrong, she'd pop you on top of your head for doing something wrong. One thing that they did not like is that we had a coloring class in first grade. We didn't have kindergarten, but we did have like first grade classes, and one of the ones that was coloring. If you colored outside the lines, Miss Helms was there, and she was going to pop you in the head for not staying within the lines. This is Miss Helms, and believe me, she was mean as a snake. she was a tough teacher, and so Miss Helms was she was a great lady, a great educator. She spent, like say 50 or 60 years as a teacher for Royse City ISD. Started when she was 14 years old. Some of these other people on here are all just citizens and people that would come down. They had a preacher that would come down to the school at least once every week, and they would have church in school every Thursday. There was you attended church at school, and some of these guys may have been some of the preachers also that came to school. Mr. McCaslin, Rip McCaslin, he owned a lot of the property around Royse City, and he also developed it and sold some of those and helped develop the town of Royse City. The first recorded football game in Royse City was in 1911. Royse City lost to Lone Oak 5-0. Scores back in those days: a touchdown was 3 points, and and a field goal was worth 6 points. So you can see the scores there. Royse City's Mule Dow his nickname was Mule. He was just a big guy. He played for the Bulldogs 1928 through 1930. He went to play for Texas Tech University, and he's in Texas Tech's Hall of Fame, Hall of Honor, and he also went on to play in the NFL, and he played for the Chicago Cardinals, which is now the Arizona Cardinals. Royse City's first district championship as a football team was in 1930. They lost to Gilmer 25-6 in a by-district championship game, and one of the guys that played on that team is in our Mr. Mule Dow is in our Athletic Hall of Fame. This is the second school after the two-story schools in Royse City. This doesn't cover the entire school. This is a high school section down on one side. It's only like 7 classrooms is all we had. This is the administrative part when you walked into the school. And back in those days, we did not have air conditioning in the schools like we said about the homes. So that was, we had one teacher that had a window unit, and everybody wanted to be in his class because they had an air conditioner in that class. Some of the football players that we had, basically, this is back in the 1950s. Some of the mascots, the little fellow right there on the left, that's my little brother. This was the little girl there was Linda Ford, and she was our next door neighbor. But they were the mascots for the Bulldogs back in those days. One of the programs that we had in 1956, 1950s, Royse City won 8 district championships in 10 years. They were one of the best football teams in the entire state of Texas. There was only one other team that had a longer winning streak than Royse City, and that was Abilene. Royse City went 39 games without a loss. This was one of the games that was held in Vernon, Texas in 1956. This team right here averaged about 60 points that they would score every game. And one game they played Bells, Texas, and they beat Bells 98-0. The next year Bells didn't play Royse City. They decided not to. This is one of the players. They all had their own nicknames. This guy, his name was Choo Choo. That was his nickname because he ran like a train when he went through. He went on to play for the University of Texas, and he was a starting fullback at the University of Texas for the Longhorns. In this game here, they were playing against Rockwall, and Rockwall was a huge rival for Royse City. One of the banners or pennants that they had back in those days. This is a senior picture that they had, and you notice the girls were all dressed in the like evening dresses, they called them back, and I don't know if they call them evening dresses anymore or not, but back in those days they did. But they all got really dressed up for their senior picture. The guys all wore suits and ties. This young man down here, he had lost his arms and his legs as he was born that way, and he went on to become an engineer, an electrical engineer. And some of these other guys in here, this one right next to this guy with the kind of the blonde-headed guy, about the 5th guy over from your left, his name was Danny Davison. They called him Dart Davison in Royse City because he was so shifty. He was very hard to tackle. He set the record for the most points ever scored in Texas high school football history in one season. These are some of the guys here that played on the team. Some of the girls also that were the senior class officers. It's another team here, just a football team that one of the, this was the entire football team. Now you see we've got like 500 kids from 7th grade through, but this was the entire high school football team. This guy, number 12, went on to play for Texas Tech, and he was all Southwest Conference for those guys at Texas Tech. Track and field was big back in those days. Another picture of number 12 on this one is my older brother. This team here was one of the better football teams in Royse City. It's another picture I've got. My brother is the guy on the left sitting down. This was going into the, this is what they call the vomitory, going into the gymnasium. Here's some of the football coaches and some of the coaches that, and some of the guys that, whenever I was in school, this was Coach Fox down here. This is our R.J. Smith, and he was the agriculture FFA leader here, and this is one of our assistant principals, Mr. Darwin. Coach Fox came whenever I was a junior in high school, and he had just come back. He just came back from Vietnam. He was a Marine, so he kind of put us through the drills whenever we were in football practice. And that's me right there on the top in the middle. That was we were the district champions in 1966 and 67. We were a very close-knit group. We had 9 seniors that year, and some of these guys have passed since then, but we're still good friends. And this is some of my kids, and this is when we were in class, and so just having a good time. We were seniors this year. This is me right here in the front, and some of my friends, and still keep up with these guys too. We had our graduating class. We had 30 kids. This last year we had 500 that graduated. One of the basketball teams. This is some of the linemen of the 1970s. These guys were kind of small. They weighed about 160, 170 pounds in this picture. Now some of the linemen that play for Royse City are about 300 pounds. Some more pictures. This team was ranked as the #1 team in the state of Texas for Royse City in 1998 and 99.